Hello. In this video, I will tell you about one of the early episodes in the history of ancient Rome, the foundation of this city and the ancient Roman state, as well as the lives of its founders, Romulus and Remus. Of course, this is a legend. However, the value of such stories, like this one, is not in studying history. Their knowledge is necessary for understanding culture. This narrative has inspired dozens of painters, and sculptures of Romulus and Remus adorn museum halls. The story has influenced the creation of musical compositions, and allusions to this theme are often found in poetic works. Therefore, I am confident that acquainting my viewers with this story will be of great benefit to them. So, let's get to the narrative. In central Italy, in the lowlands of the Tiber River, lay the region of Latium. It was home to numerous Latin cities, and one of them was the city of Alba Longa, founded by ancient Trojans who had fled to Italy after the fall of Troy under the leadership of Aeneas. 300 years after Aeneas arrived in Italy, Alba Longa was ruled by a king named Numitor. However, his younger brother, Amulius, overthrew Numitor and seized power in the city. Amulius spared Numitor's life but ordered the execution of his son, Lausus. Besides a son, the deposed ruler also had a daughter, Rhea Silvia. To prevent her from bearing potential claimants to the throne, Amulius made her a Vestal Virgin, and as such, she was to remain celibate. However, Rhea Silvia gave birth to twin boys, and when asked about their father, she claimed that they were the offspring of the god Mars. According to historians, though, Rhea Silvia was likely raped, and Plutarch even believed that the perpetrator was Amulius himself, who, wearing armor, deceived the young woman by appearing to her in the guise of a god. Nevertheless, in the collective consciousness of the Romans, the version of the divine origin of Rome's founders prevailed. However, as a Vestal Virgin who had broken her vow of celibacy, she was imprisoned, and after giving birth to the children, she was executed. Amulius ordered the infants to be drowned in the Tiber River. A servant placed the newborns in a basket and descended to the river to cast them into the water. However, upon seeing the tumultuous and swift current, he hesitated to approach the water and, leaving his burden at the edge of the cliff, departed. The current carried the basket to the shore between the Palatine and Capitoline hills. When the water receded, the completely dry basket found itself at the base of a fig tree, which would later become a sacred tree for the Romans. At the cry of the infants, a she-wolf, having recently given birth to her own cubs, came to their aid. The wild predator did not harm Romulus and Remus. Instead, she allowed them to suckle her milk. Soon, the twins were discovered by a local shepherd named Faustulus, who, along with his wife, decided to raise them as their own children. Moreover, his wife, Acca Laurentia, had recently given birth and also became a wet nurse for the infants. She was a prostitute. The Latin term is lupa, think of lupaner, and in Latin, a female wolf is also called a lupa. This linguistic coincidence explains the strange episode in the story of the twins being nursed by a she-wolf. Faustulus named the twins Romulus and Remus. From a young age, the boys displayed noble bearing, tall stature, and beauty. As they grew older, both showed courage, valor, the ability to stare danger in the face unwaveringly, in short, complete fearlessness. As they grew up, they assembled a band that protected shepherds from bandits and launched attacks on marauding gangs themselves. In one of these clashes, Remus was captured by Numitor's shepherds, and Numitor began interrogating him. Numitor asked the youth where he came from, and Remus recounted what he had heard from the old shepherd: the flooding of the Tiber, the twins in the basket, the she-wolf. Numitor realized that before him stood his grandson. At that moment, outside the city walls, the noise and clanging of weapons could be heard. It was Romulus and his comrades coming to his brother's aid. Numitor and Remus opened the gates for them. The army of the brothers, along with Numitor's contingent of soldiers, set out for Alba Longa. The city was taken by storm, and Amulius was killed by Romulus, with Numitor reclaiming the throne. Having restored power to their grandfather, Romulus and Remus decided to establish a new community. Among their supporters were many runaway slaves and criminals whom the residents of Alba Longa did not want to accept into their midst, and disbanding the army was not an option. Therefore, Romulus and Remus decided to build a new city in the place where they had once been nurtured by the she-wolf. However, they could not reach a unanimous decision on where exactly to begin the construction. As it is known, modern Rome is situated on 7 hills: the Capitoline, the Palatine, the Aventine, the Quirinal, the Viminal, the Esquiline, and the Caelian. Romulus suggested founding the new city on the Palatine Hill, while Remus proposed the Aventine Hill. They decided to part ways and await a sign from the gods. Whoever first saw 6 vultures circling above their chosen hill would be the victor in the dispute, and that would be the location of the city. They waited through the entire night. At dawn, the vultures appeared first over Remus Hill, then over Romulus Hill. However, over the Aventine, there were 6 vultures, and over the Palatine, there were 12. Each of the brothers was convinced that the gods had expressed their favor, and the disagreement escalated into an open conflict. Eventually, they did decide to build on the Palatine, but Remus remained dissatisfied. The foundation of the city was carried out as follows: on the Palatine, they marked a spot that would be the city center. Then, they used a plow to draw the city's boundaries by tracing a circle. The plow was made of copper, and it was pulled by a white bull and a white cow, with Romulus following behind, chanting prayers. His comrades followed behind him, turning the freshly cut earth toward the city so that no clump remained on the other side. Where the gates were supposed to be, they lifted the plow and carried it through the air. The furrow was considered sacred, but the gates could not be sacred because they would be used for both clean and unclean objects. Above the drawn furrow, Romulus began digging a trench and building a wall, although it was not very tall, only knee-high. Remus burst into laughter and declared, even a baby could cross these walls, and he jumped over the wall. This action was utterly reckless because Romulus was responsible for the fate of the new city and was obliged to avenge its mockery. Fulfilling his duty to the future citizens of the city, Romulus seized a sword and killed his brother, saying, "May anyone who dares to violate the boundaries of my city with violence perish in this way." Then Romulus completed the rituals and named the city after himself, Rome, the city of Romulus. The assembly of the people proclaimed Romulus as their king. Remus was buried on the Aventine, where he had dreamed of founding a city. Modern archaeologists date the city's founding to the 8th century BCE, while Roman historians even calculated the year and day of Rome's foundation, April 21, 753 BCE. So, the story of the founding of Rome is concluded. If it was interesting and informative, please subscribe to this channel and give it a thumbs up. Goodbye.